It doesn't matter how old you are when you receive a diagnosis of an illness or just the fact that you're getting older. Everyone goes through the same stages of dying. Everyone grieves. Some may be in more than one stage at a time. The stages are denial, not me, usually rather quick, turning to anger, which can be in many forms and towards many people. Next would be bargaining, which is usually done with God or the person's higher power. When bargaining doesn't seem to be getting them anywhere, depression sinks in. Depression is the longest stage, and people actually never make it to the final stage of acceptance, which is said to be very real and beautiful to behold. Most people end up dying in the depression stage and never accept their fate, which is very sad. Euthanasia is defined as ending human life by fast, painless means for the purpose of ending severe physical suffering. Voluntary euthanasia is when the person whose life is at issue knowingly and freely decides what shall be done, and non-voluntary, which is when someone else decides what shall be done for them. All patients, no matter what their condition or health status, have several last resort options which could easily be deemed of forms of euthanasia but are legal. That is why physician-assisted suicide should be a legal option for a terminally ill patient. Many people have living wills and DNRs nowadays. Patients who are mentally capable of making reasonable decisions, and if not, their family can do so for them, have the right to withdraw from advanced life support machinery, voluntary to stop eating and drinking, and do not resuscitate orders if they choose. These would be types of passive euthanization, or voluntary, stopping or not starting some form of treatment which allows the person to die, which are considered legal and acceptable medical practices. Your right to forego life-sustaining therapy is not to be kept alive by advanced life-supporting machines. An example of this would be an elderly man falls off a ladder and fractures his spine. He arrives at the hospital and he consents to have surgery and placed on a respirator, hoping for a full recovery in a few weeks. Several weeks later, there is no change in his condition, and the man doesn't want to live this way. He can't even imagine what life would be this way. After several intensive discussions with his doctor and his loved ones, knowing that there is no other cure out there for his condition, he chooses to be lightly sedated and taken off of the ventilator. He dies the next day. What about a life or death decision regarding an infant? Because the infant is not able to express their wishes, they will always be cases of non-voluntary euthanasia. An infant is born with Down syndrome, which is a genetic disorder that causes mental retardation and sometimes physical problems as well. Let's say the baby has a repairable but life-threatening blockage between the stomach and the small intestine. The parents refuse to give permission for the surgery to repair the problem, and the doctor follows the wishes of the parents. As a result, the infant dies. Emanuel and Batlin estimate that legalizing physician-assisted suicide could save each year up to $627 million in the United States alone. While this is still less than 1% of the total annual U.S. healthcare spending, the savings for an individual health plan or provider institution could be substantial. The economic impact on the patient's family is likely to be even more dramatic, particularly if the patient lacks healthcare insurance. This savings could average for a family of about $20,000 in 6 months, just by them choosing to have a physician-assisted suicide. Terminally ill patients already take the costs and burdens of their care in account when making end-of-life treatment decisions. Oregon Death with Dignity Act, an Oregon law, requires several safeguards regarding the care of patients near the end of life. They include presenting patients with options of palliative care, ensuring the patients are competent to make end-of-life decisions for themselves, limiting the procedures available for the terminally ill, ensuring that the patient is making the request and not the family. They have to get a second opinion, and it has to be they have to make more than one request, and it needs to be at least 2 weeks apart. Next of kin must be involved, and then if and when the physician does write a legal prescription, they must report it to the Oregon Public Health Division. By using these safeguards, patients are allowed in Oregon to go to their doctor that they trust and voice their true feelings of how they feel about what's going on when they grow near the end with unmanageable pain and just don't want to continue on with treatments. Many patients have full trust in their doctors, and with Oregon having this law, it acts and saves some people from just committing suicide on their own because they can't bear to continue with the life that they have. When you are in so much pain and you have to be sedated all the time just to bear with that pain, what kind of life is that actually that you're having? Many also don't want to be a burden on their families either. When people know that they will not be allowed to make decisions about their own lives and forced into doing something against their will, or even unable to make their own choices, this help gives people a peace of mind. Thus, many of the persons who have used Oregon's assisted law reported that they did so because they didn't want to be dependent and felt better being in control of their own lives. Moreover, as we know ourselves better than anyone else knows us, we are the ones best able to make good decisions in the situation that we are currently in. In severe times of need, we should do what is most likely to bring the greatest happiness, and not only to ourselves but to those that are affected by our actions. Should a person have to suffer so long and have to make so many bad choices along the way, when they should have the right to choose and let their doctor assist them in ending their life if they choose so? Is it wrong when you can clearly see that some of my examples in the beginning are not considered wrong or immoral? Everyone wants to have control over their lives at all times, including the most desperate times of need. My examples, you can see how some of the families had to make the decision. I mean, the infant had no choice at all of what was going on. And some of the patients chose as the elderly man did for himself, because he didn't want to suffer that way. I feel if the government would allow physician-assisted suicides, the patients would have a greater respect for their disease due to the fact that they have a sense of control. There are other forms of medical procedures that are deemed acceptable and not considered as euthanasia. After all, we live in the United States of America and we have freedoms. My life and how I live my life is my choice, thanks to the soldiers who fought for our rights. Therefore, I feel a physician should be allowed to prescribe me with the means to end my life if I have a limited time to live due to a lethal diagnosis, I'm full of suffering, have been drugged all the time to manage the pain, and made several requests in a rational state of mind. After all, when is enough enough?